You and I agree about the need for higher capital standards as part of the solution to the problem. We've talked about that in the past, and agree on regulating derivatives for transparency. Hernando de Soto's arguments, the importance of that in terms of being a component of the equation. I think my concern, as I've expressed to you before, is that we're taking our eye off the ball and instead pursuing this course of micromanaging the financial sector without the international community really buying into the approach that we've laid out. And you're right to say that the regulatory community in Europe, says that they will buy into the approach. But that's not what is happening in country. I think the concerning comments by the CEO of a large foreign bank who called the U.S. approach to derivatives a terrific opportunity. He said it's one of the biggest own goals in financial market history. And he says, the Asians don't need to do anything to gain an advantage. This is the type of press, if you pick up the Financial Times, the kinds of advertisements, basically, that are being made. And then when you think about the Fed chairman's own comment on this point, he says portions of the proposed derivatives rules, I think he's talking about extraterritoriality here, could create a significant competitive disadvantage for U.S.-based institutions. So the farther we get from passage of Dodd-Frank, the less likely it seems that Europe is going to blindly follow us, and I don't see that on Asia's part. They've already flat out rejected many of the reforms that we've instituted. So what I want to ask you is, will Treasury commit to ensuring that if we can't get that concurrence, we hit the pause button on some of this micromanagement until we bring them online so that everybody is on the same playing field and we don't have to worry about that competitiveness issue that the Fed chairman is bringing up?
Let me just say, the Fed chairman is right to point out that there are provisions of the law that, because of how they treat the foreign operations of U.S. affiliates, that could cause that problem that we're worried about. But I would say, in general, based on what our counterparts around the world are saying, I'm more encouraged than I thought I would be at this point. And it's not just what they're saying, but how they're drafting their rules. I'll just give you one example. We've had 3 decades or 4 decades of experience with global capital standards. Not an excellent experience, frankly. They were set too low. But we started 30 years ago designing a global standard for capital. No such regime existed on derivatives. But we proposed after the legislation was passed that we negotiate a global regime on margin for derivatives. And we found very strong support, not just from the European systems, but from the Asians, too, to the same basic principle. But we're going to keep working on it, and we are making sure that we try to sequence and design the rules in the United States so we're not in the position of landing ours before we're confident that the others are going to land theirs in a sensible place.
No, I understand.
And we're not going to do this on trust. We're going to verify and make sure we're all over it.
I think I'm going to lay out another argument here that I think would give us, you and I both, pause, because I think we agree on this too. It's no surprise that the international community really is pushing back on this, because they look at us and they say it eludes the U.S. They can't even get their international coordination right between the CFTC and the SEC, right? Well, so
you're right to say that
wildly divergent views here.
Well, no, I wouldn't say it quite that way, but I say you're right, and I'll reinforce your point. We left in place in the American financial system a very complicated set of independent agencies with overlapping jurisdictions, different responsibilities, and that makes the coordination challenge much harder, but much more important, because you're right to say, if we don't have alignment, if we don't have, I'm not sure it was a mistake, but you guys decided to do it. If you don't have alignment among them, then you're right to say, how are we going to convince the rest of the world to come?
Right, and we're out of alignment on 50 different items at the moment.
No, that overstates it.
In terms of the CIF rules.
That overstates it, but we want them, where the statute permits it, we want them to be fully aligned.
And we're not
I agree with
there.
you about that. And we're not there yet. I agree with you
until
about
we get there, it's going to be hard to figure out how you get the Europeans there, and that's why you've got to be very cautious here. There's a competitiveness problem. If, to quote a former Fed chairman, if the capital markets march off to London. And that's the problem when you're reading the
You're
Financial
right,
Times.
and we're not going to let that
advertised.
happen.
Yeah.
And I think we can, and I'm reasonably encouraged at this point that we're going to be able to prevent that, but we're very hard at it. And again, part of that is making sure that where we can, we have alignment here at home. And you're exactly right to point out that if we're sort of off a little bit here, it's hard to get the world to come to a common standard. But you're right to emphasize that we care about it as much as you do, and and the SEC and the CFTC and the Fed are working to the same objective.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Secretary
Mr.
Geithner.
Secretary.